everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? Grab your coffee. I'm drinking tea right now, iced tea. All right. I got a thirst. So the one thing that we're going to be talking about today is, once again, force majeure. It's like I keep telling you guys, watch, listen, okay? But this is a global force majeure. Yeah. A series of events has been set in motion, all right, that I believe will end a global force majeure. Yeah, among Western nations. Now, if this is correct, it means that many financial obligations, potentially including Social Security, U.S. Treasury debt, pensions, derivatives, commodities, paper contracts, industrial deliverables, insurance payout obligations, etc., would be nullified. And this all appears to be a part of the Great Reset and the plan to clear out the U.S. Treasury debt and the overbearing debt of the other Western nations by defaulting without defaulting, if that makes any sense. Meaning blaming some other great emergency for the cancellation of financial obligations and the wholesale resetting of the global money canvas. So in order to achieve this, Western nations must first invoke global war with either Russia or China. And as it has been exhaustively documented this year, many efforts are underway by the potato regime and the controllers to ignite such war with both adversaries. The latest example is the Ukrainian counteroffensive, heavily hyped by Western media, that saw Russian military forces withdraw from a region containing about 40 to 50 small villages and towns in order to avoid being encircled by Ukrainian forces. But the key here is to understand that Ukrainian forces were trained and led by NATO military leaders while deploying NATO equipment, including high-precision artillery, and long-range rocket artillery, which was operated largely by British and American troops. Now, in effect, the counteroffensive against this particular segment of Russia's front lines in eastern Ukraine was run primarily by the UK and the USA, not Ukrainian military leadership. And this attack was the West's practical declaration, if you will, of war against Russia, even if such a declaration has not yet been officially voiced. Like, they didn't say, this is the beginning of World War III. Nothing like that has yet been said. So, don't mistake these words, okay? Now, Russia fully recognizes this fact, and they also know it is a full-scale war with NATO and Western Europe. Not merely a special military operation that can be won with reserve units. Thus, Russia is preparing to now officially declare war against the West and invoke its full military forces to engage and destroy Western Europe. So, Russia has come to the conclusion, okay, that NATO will never allow Russia to exist as a sovereign nation. And Russia now faces an existential threat from NATO nations and Western Europe in general. Now, you may or may not recall that Russia had recently promised the world it would not use nuclear weapons unless it faced an existential threat. And the NATO-led Ukrainian counteroffensive, they have now made it clear that Russia does indeed face precisely such a threat, and that failure to defeat NATO as a whole will mean the end of Russia. There will be no coexistence, all right? Either Western Europe or Russia must be defeated. It's either one or the other. Can't have both type thing. Now, the NATO-driven Ukrainian counteroffensive just handed Russia the internal justification that it needed to escalate a full war against the West, which may include the deployment of nuclear weapons, but will also it will almost certainly see the use of non-nuclear thermobaric weapons, which are also devastating in their own way. Okay, so Potatoes controllers, they control the strings, right on, already know that they're facing an election wipeout in November. And by any means necessary, they believe that in November it must be thrown into chaos, okay? Or Democrats will lose the House and possibly the Senate. I'm fine, sweetie. Yeah, I'm fine. I know. And this is, rendering the potato administration largely ineffective for the next 2 years. Remember when Obama was in office and the Republicans had the House and the Senate and he was considered a lame duck president? Okay, well, it's like that's going to happen all over again. Okay, it'll be a lame duck. Okay. Now, it is in the interest of the Democrats to see a world war emerge before, oh God, I don't even want to say it, before Halloween. Even if it means staging a nuclear detonation on a U.S. city and blaming it on Putin, because they got to blame him for everything. You know it, I know it, we've seen it, we've heard it. It's come out of their mouths. It's Putin, Putin, Putin. It's like Marsha, 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 Putin, Putin, Putin. All right? And rest assured, this is one of the options in their portfolio of doom that it is being considered. Now, other options include a national power grid takedown scenario blamed on Russian cyber attackers, right? Or a financial Armageddon that would freeze banks, halt all transactions, plunge the nation into instant chaos and civil unrest. And this can all be accomplished at the flick of a switch. All while blaming Putin, Putin, Putin for a cyber attack. Now, the more aggressive Russia's response to Ukraine's counteroffensive, the more quickly Potato, Obama, and the globalists can push us all into a world war. At which point they can invoke the same unconstitutional abuses of power that America saw with World War II. Who here had a family member, like your grandparents or even your parents, fight in World War II? My grandfather. Okay. In case you're not familiar with what happened back then, I can refresh your memory. Forced internment in concentration camps based on your ethnicity. Government confiscation of commercial inventory from private and public companies. Government takeover of private businesses forcing wartime production. Government price controls on strategic commodities. Criminalization of anti-government speech. Rationing of clothing, sugar, coffee, milk, cheese, meat, butter, and other foods. Citizens were handed, and I've talked about this before, rationing coupons or ration cards, and had to make do with limited supply of food basics. In other words, under war, the government becomes a dictatorship. See, these rationing, the rations that went on from World War II in America, oh God, it kills me. All right, it kills me because back then, I mean, they literally got a book and it said you get this and that and this and that's all you get. You know? And you had to feed your family on that. And if there wasn't enough, too bad, so sad, you don't get any more. And, you know, you had to have, your own garden and stuff like that. And even that, so, this is exactly what the Democrats are trying to achieve yet again, as a way to keep themselves in power and nullify the Constitution as well as the elections. And they simply need Putin to declare war and start launching more aggressive weapons, including the thermobaric missile strikes that can be claimed as nuclear weapons, right, by the dishonest media. And once the big bombs start dropping, Potato's handlers, they'll just flick the kill switch, man, to take down the power grid, the banking institutions, then declare Putin as an unleashed cyber warfare attack against America. When all the while, people like you and me were like, stop lying, And that will be almost instantly followed by wartime powers once again. Declarations and the unleashing of military occupation across America, combined with the government suspension of our constitutional rights. Look at the lockdowns that we had to deal with, right? They were a dry run for precisely this same scenario. And under the NDAA that was signed into law by Obama in 2012, the federal government they have the unrestricted power to seize all food and farms and fuel and ammo and commodities and fertilizer and anything else that they deem to be strategic national resources. They need it now, as you know, as we're heading to war. All right, and unless cooler heads prevail, we are on a trajectory to World War III. I'm sorry, and in what could be a matter of a few weeks. And Russia is rumored to be just days away from its own declaration of war against the West. And this would almost certainly be followed by a stepping up of missile attacks against Western cities like Berlin, Paris, London, Brussels. And notably, Western European nations, they have no means to stop the hypersonic missile strikes, nor any real means to stop Russia's mid-range nuclear strikes, like the it's Iskander, Iskander. Those missiles, okay, because they're nuclear capable. And Russia can turn Europe's cities into rubble in like minutes. Literally. And the first time, the flight time, rather, is like 3 minutes. Meaning there's no warning whatsoever for millions of Europeans who would literally be like vaporized within, you know, even while their cities turn to rubble and ash. And Western Europe is already facing a devastating winter with obscene levels of food and energy scarcity and cost increases. You hear it all the time from when my favorite gal pal in the UK, when she writes in. So if the power grid is taken down and the municipal water systems don't function because they've been hit by missiles, Western Europe, I mean, they're going to find themselves in the Dark Ages. Freezing to death, starving, dying, you know, from feces-borne diseases, begging for humanitarian assistance from a world that they're already in a food and energy crisis. They can't even help themselves, let alone somebody else, you know? So, at this point, Russia has given, or sorry, no, it was NATO, my bad. NATO, they gave Russia no option other than escalation. And that's because, once again, the U.S., they want this World War III before November. Bastards. And at this rate of escalating events, it may very well get exactly what they're begging for. And if Europe erupts into a world war, I mean, the entire Western financial system, like the debt pyramids, Ponzi scheme shite, it's going to collapse. It's going to collapse because it was built on highly leveraged debt, financialization instruments, rather than actual assets and earnings. And right now, the entire Western financial system is literally hanging on by a thread, running on hype and faith that's pushed by the lying corporate media. The stock market, real estate market, commercial debt market, I mean, they're all like essentially like fictitious fraud with very little in the way of underlying asset values that could justify the current inflated prices. And as a result, even a small incursion into the fragile financial pyramid could result in a catastrophic contagion collapse. It's just, God, you know, when you actually sit down and think about it and analyze everything, your whole world just goes, Jesus. please, you know. But all right, guys, I'm out of here. I love you. I'll see you in the next one. You stay safe, you stay positive, you keep prepping. And as always, fearless. Ciao.